Adams here, the voice of the ring, and the following is a presentation of the Mancast Network podcast for the man in all of us.
Hey guys, it's the Princess of Pro Wrestling, SoCal Val from Fight TV, and you're watching Opinion City on the Mancast Network, and I am a proud Opinion City girl.
All right, welcome to a Saturday night edition of Opinion City. On this episode, we take an in-depth look at our hosts and what it is they love about the crazy world of professional wrestling. We discuss the current state of professional wrestling as we see it. And in our featured topic, we give our picks for the best professional wrestlers to have never won a WWF/WWE World Title. I'm your host, Ralph Heinmarch, and joining me on this journey into the world of pro wrestling is my co-host, the former host of WVYC-FM's award-winning show, Decades Gone By. It's the one and only Parmesan Russell. What's going on, buddy?
Guys, how are you?
I'm fantastic. We should have been doing this quite some time ago. We've been trying to get this together, but it's nice to be back and chatting about professional wrestling. It has been way too long.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, so we're definitely excited. So before we get started, throw out a couple thank yous to some very special people for their contribution to this episode. Our Mancast Network intro comes courtesy of pro wrestling announcer and commentator extraordinaire, the voice of the ring, David Adams. You can find him on Twitter at Voice of the Ring, where you can check out everything David is doing in the world of wrestling. And of course, you'll recognize our Opinion City intro coming from friend of the show and pro wrestling superstar, SoCal Val. You can find Val on Twitter at SoCal Valerie. She's got so many things going on, so please check her out as well. And of course, we are on Twitter at Mancast Network, where you can find links to all of our Opinion City family. Thanks, guys, for helping to make this show amazing. So let's dive right in here. I think the very first thing we're going to talk about is kind of how we got into the great world of professional wrestling, how we became fans. So I think first and foremost, why don't you talk about maybe how you got into wrestling and some of your favorites over the years?
Well, my older brother Adam was the one who got me into it initially. I don't even remember where it started, but it was specifically Kane's debut that caught my eye. When he came into that cell, busted open that door, Tombstone Taker, I was like, what is this? And I need more of it. It sucked me in, and I've been a Kane fan ever since. Kane will always be my number one favorite wrestler.
That's awesome. That's a really cool moment. Definitely exciting. I go back a little further than that. I was always a Hulkamaniac growing up. Like that was the big thing, just kind of swept up in all the Hulk Hogan stuff. And I don't really remember where the whole wrestling thing for me started, but I just remember being like super young, and like my cousins would come over, and one of them would be like, hey, this wrestling thing's on TV, and so we'd watch. I definitely remember WrestleMania 5 being the first WrestleMania I saw. I remember getting a VHS copy from the video store. And so I kind of go back that far, but the Hulk Hogan thing kind of morphed into a love for Stone Cold Steve Austin that just kind of resonated with me. So yeah, it's been a long time, but more recently I've kind of shifted into more of a focus onto the independent scene. I love just the whole vibe of independent wrestling, just, being right there on top of the action. It's a whole different feel than what you get out of maybe, the WWE these days.
Absolutely. I agree.
I think one of the big things, and this kind of takes us maybe into our next discussion here, but we're talking about the current state of professional wrestling as we see it. And despite everything that's going on with WWE, and things are changing with the sale, and with the draft and all that stuff, things are kind of getting shaken up. But I feel like right now there are so many options. Whatever you like in professional wrestling, there's something out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's not just one now. There's like 5 or 6 companies that you can go to if you're a New Japan fan or a Ring of Honor fan, an AEW fan, WWE fan. Impact Wrestling is still a thing. Like, there's so many ways to watch wrestling that you don't have to be stuck with just one company, which I think, as us wrestling fans, is just great to have so many different options to watch. If you don't like one, you can watch the other, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many ways to find your professional wrestling these days. I mean, anybody with an internet connection can find, all kinds of options. And I think the great thing about what's really kind of been this boom on the internet with professional wrestling is that it kind of lets all these, smaller independent companies that may not have the national reach, get this whole other opportunity to get themselves out there, to find new fans, to put their product out there. I mean, I have a friend who has done some ring announcing and backstage interviews for a wrestling company in China. They're called they're called Middle Kingdom Wrestling, and he's an English teacher in China. And so, being a professional wrestling fan, he got very involved in it there, and met some people and had the opportunity to work with them. But I mean, they're in China, and I can find them on YouTube. Like, it's insane. Yeah, it's really crazy. So I think that's a really good thing. We used to talk about how wrestling would be maybe oversaturated with too much product, or there used to be talk about, like, wrestling shows every day of the week, and how much wrestling that was, and how much there was. And people really kind of felt like that might be maybe watering down the product. But just looking at it now, being able to go to shows live, being able to see wrestling right there in front of you, especially with a lot of the indie companies, they kind of go out of their way to make that experience so much better, so that, the fans really want to seek them out and go see the shows, because it is that different experience from, maybe sort of the overproduced WWE product. I think it's interesting as well, when you're looking at just the differences between, like, these big companies, because you have WWE and you have AEW, and nothing against Impact Wrestling, because Impact Wrestling is putting on some great shows. They're putting out a great product. But when you look at WWE and AEW, they're constantly growing. They're like AEW right now, between the shows they currently have, the shows they have on YouTube. Now, Ring of Honor is getting television again with, the Ring of Honor streaming service. And now, there's talk about this new AEW like Saturday night show. So there's all these crazy things going on, where these companies are just growing so much. I do find it a little interesting, and I don't know if I think this is necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but you still have companies like AEW that are relying on the traditional pay-per-view model. Now, I know that they have, different streaming ways to see them, but again, it's not like, WWE had the WWE network, but AEW is on, like, different streaming networks where you get, more than just AEW. So yeah. I don't know if I think that's really a good thing or a bad thing. I am a little concerned sometimes, because I hear about shows that I want to see, and some of these certain indie companies are still putting out shows under this pay-per-view model, where it's a little more expensive than, say, $5.99 a month, or $9.99 a month or whatever it be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I like that trend. I like the streaming model. I like being able to, pay a certain price a month and just be able to see, the shows I want to see. But it can get really expensive if you're trying to keep up with a lot of product.
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely expensive.
I was thinking about getting the ROH app to watch ROH, but again, it's just one of those things where I'm like, I don't want to have another subscription service added on just to watch their show.
Yeah,
As much
because
as I want to see it, it's just there's so many other subscription services out there now. It's like, do I really want another service? Like,
sure, and think about most people, because most people probably have like Netflix and Hulu, and then you pick up Peacock so you can get WWE, and
mhm.
there's just so much out there that's pulling for your subscription dollars every month, and now you've got another one, and you got to think about, if you're buying a subscription service just for wrestling, how much are you really going to watch that with everything else you've got going on? If you're
Yep.
watching, WWE programming every week, you're watching AEW programming. If you're, lucky enough to catch Impact, because not everybody has. Again, Impact is not on necessarily the best TV model, so
Yeah.
they don't have the reach that the others do. So if you're lucky enough to get them as well, here you are with all this programming already during the week, and now you're trying to figure out, when am I going to fit in this streaming stuff?
Yep.
Not to mention if it's a week where there's pay-per-views or premium live events, as they call them. But it's just, there's a lot out there, and it's a good thing that we have so much of it.
Yeah.
But it can also be a bad thing where it's like, how do I pick and choose what I watch when I want to see everything?
Exactly. I still firmly believe that if all of the wrestling companies came together for one thing and have one set network where you can choose from any catalog, WCW, WWE, TNA, ROH, I think that would be probably the best way for all of it to just be accessible. That would never happen because there's too many people competing, but I think that would have been the best option, to have everyone on one network for one price, and you can watch any wrestling you want under one roof.
Yeah, I think we're kind of getting closer to that. This whole WWE UFC thing. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see what happens with the WWE content on Peacock. Is that going to go somewhere else? Is that going to join with UFC into something? Not necessarily the streaming stuff, but the first thing I thought of when I heard about the sale was I could see them doing like a 2-night premium live event, sort of like they do with WrestleMania now, but having one night be UFC and one night be WWE. I can see it coming because there's money in that.
I mean, that would be interesting. It would just be, how would they go about like advertising for that?
Mhm.
Would WWE run ads for UFC? Would UFC run ads for WWE during their shows and vice versa? Kind of like give each other like the one up.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting to see how they work together, sort of under the same umbrella. Because I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to be missed if they don't do some cross promotional stuff. I mean, they're so sort of, I mean, they're sort of in each other's worlds as it is. You've got history with MMA guys coming to WWE, Brock Lesnar and UFC. Like there's a lot of history there. So I think there's really some chances and some opportunities to do some really great sort of cross promotional stuff. But who knows? I mean, they may keep the businesses completely separate for all we know.
I was just gonna say they may just do the opposite and just act like nothing ever happened and just keep their own courses and just stay the course.
It's very possible. These, I mean, who would have ever thought we'd be sitting here talking about WWE being sold to begin with? So anything can happen.
Yeah, that's very fair.
So, just a quick aside before we really get into our big topic for this episode. what do you think's going on with CM Punk? For those who are listening to us, Sean has a CM Punk shirt on, so I'm interested to see where you think CM Punk is going to end up. You think he's going back to AEW, or you think he's going somewhere else?
I think 100% he's going back to AEW. I think from all the stuff I've heard and read, they're going to do a hard brand split, and CM Punk is going to be the main star of their AEW Saturday show, and the Elite and the BCC, for those who don't know, that's the Blackpool Combat Club, will be running the main show on Dynamite. And they haven't announced it yet, but they're saying that there may be a new surprise coming other than CM Punk for the big Saturday show when it debuts.
That would be interesting. So you don't think there's any chance that like Punk and the Elite are going to be able to work together again?
Well, I think the idea of the hard brand split is that if they don't want to work with Punk, now there's an option to not have to. However, during the pay-per-view live events, or whatever companies want to call their pay-per-views, they'll have to be there in the same room because it's going to be probably a joint event for everybody to be there. So as long as they can coexist for the one day, and then they can still do their hard brand split, I think they'll be okay. If they really want to work together, I think they'll find a way to make it happen. I just don't think both parties are ready to work together just yet.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I get about the whole thing. It'll be interesting to see what happens with their big show in Wembley, because I mean, if you're gonna bring Punk back, and you want to sell 60,000, 80,000 tickets, there's some real opportunity there, especially with it being the first time like they're over there. It's a big deal for them. Wembley Stadium is a huge deal, so you really want to do something special for that, and having that be maybe the first interaction between them after Punk comes back.
Yeah.
I think just the fact of having them all in the same arena at the same time is going to be enough to make fans wonder and want to see what's going on.
Well, this is the one thing that makes me happy, and me and my brother have been talking about it forever now, is that I think thanks to AEW, kayfabe is 100% back, because no one knows what's going to happen anymore. It's always speculation. Is it this? Is it that? We don't know, because AEW brought back kayfabe. And after much talks with my brother, it makes sense that AEW is kayfabe, because we don't know now. In WWE, we can kind of like predict most of the time what's going to happen, and we know. But with AEW, we're like, no, we don't know. It's all speculation. Even the whole Saturday show and Pinnacle Vegas, it's still speculation. So it's all hearsay as of right now. We don't know if Punk's coming back for sure, but it's all been hearsay and what have you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really it's such an interesting situation, because I mean, that's one thing that I don't think people have necessarily talked about that much, honestly, is the fact that you are looking at a situation where kayfabe is really making a return, and so it's like, what do we know, what do we don't know, especially looking at what Punk's been doing recently. I mean, everybody freaked out over him showing up backstage at WWE,
Yep.
but at the same time, like, we still, so many people have reported on what happened, but we still don't know what exactly is going on. We have no idea what he was doing there. We have no idea, what exactly happened. People have reported a whole bunch of things. But honestly, like, we weren't there, so we don't know. He could have been just stopping by to say hello. I mean, there's discussion that he probably, had a short conversation with Hunter. I mean, that, who knows what that could have been, or it could have just been, hey, saying hello. So it's really interesting, because we're kind of at this point again where we don't know, but we know, but we don't. So, and that's happening with a lot of things in wrestling right now, especially sort of along the same lines as the CM Punk stuff. You know, you're seeing the Goldberg stuff is really kind of throwing
Yeah,
people off as well, because he's
yeah,
out there putting stuff out, and it seems like the bridge is pretty well burnt between him and WWE, just by some of the comments he's made about not being happy with WWE. So, but we don't know if that's for sure. I mean, how many people have had a problem with WWE and still found a way to work with them?
yep.
It's all
I mean,
about the money.
look at look at the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes. He left the company because he was upset with his direction, made his own company, and then said, "I'm gonna go back and finish my story." No one thought he would have even went back because they thought he was going to be with AEW until the wheels fell off. But here we are. He's now same character, but back in WWE, pushed as the top star on Raw. Well, going forward, probably the top star on Raw. Like they always say in wrestling, never say never, and it really is never a truer statement than right now in this modern age of wrestling.
It's interesting that you bring up Cody too, because I don't, you know, Cody followed a very similar road as another WWE superstar, and people don't often talk about this, but I mean, Drew McIntyre essentially did the same thing. Now, he didn't start his own company, but he was seen as sort of getting this sort of huge push as the chosen one and all this stuff, and then it all just fell apart. And so, what
Yep.
did he do? He went to the Indies. He, took his time on the indies and really built, this Drew McIntyre brand to the point where WWE really had no choice but to bring him back. I mean, he
Yep.
showed them something different, and it's a really beautiful model for wrestlers to kind of go off and reinvent themselves a little bit. And I can see where there are certain superstars now that I feel like if they could get their release, they could probably do the same thing. I mean, I'm looking at Dolph Ziggler because
Mm-hmm.
Dolph Ziggler is a talent. Dolph Ziggler had, title runs, and he's had big feuds and big matches, but, he's never really reached, I think, the full potential that's there. So, I mean, really, he could go off and do the same thing.
I truly believe
Honestly,
that Ziggler is one of the best sellers that WWE has currently.
oh, Ziggler's fantastic. I
He
mean,
can make anything look good.
yeah, he's the kind of guy, he's like a generational talent. He's the kind of guy that can go in there and just have a great match with practically anybody. I mean, he could go in there and have a great match with, the proverbial mop or the chair.
Yeah,
And, I mean, it would look amazing. I kind of, I don't know where I want to see CM Punk end up. I mean, I understand that, like AEW is the most logical choice, and they're probably going to work everything out, and things are going to be great, and hopefully they'll do good business because then it's good for everybody. But I would love to see, Punk kind of go back to the indies and really, make a run on the indies and kind of build himself up to the point where like indie fans are aware of what's going on, but in the mainstream picture, like you have almost completely forgotten about him, and then he just shows up out of nowhere. Like I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's such a big thing for him, is just like showing up out of nowhere, and like everybody's kind of forgotten about him except for the indie fans. They know what he's been doing, but he shows up on AEW and people are just like, I can't believe we forgot about him. Like, because if you take him so far out of the story that people forget about him, I think it makes the return so much bigger.
I think that's why I think I've always been such a big CM Punk fan. I know that like they always say that backstage he's not the same person, but like fans never give up on him. He was gone for 7 years, and for 7 years at shows you would still hear CM Punk chants, and WWE for a while had to fight to mute them because they would still do it at every big event, every Chicago event, they would chant his name louder than the mics can cut it off for. They never forgot about CM Punk for the last 7 years. We have been clamoring for his comeback for 7 years. And I guess AEW was like, all right. He was like, it's time. It's time.
I think part of it with CM Punk, and I mean, back in the day, I was, you know, a CM Punk fan. I was a big fan of all his work in WWE. The stuff they did with him, I thought was just super creative. You know, they took it in a direction, honestly, I didn't think they'd go. But they went with it, and you know, just the stuff at where he was quitting and taking the title with him, and that was just like fantastic stuff. And part of it with him is that he is such a polarizing character. Like whenever he is on the screen, you're just kind of drawn into you know, what he's doing, and I think that's a big part of why fans never really forgot about him. But I also think that he and Cody Rhodes are in the same position. The reason I think that fans were, you know, chanting at you know, Raw and shows like that every time they were in Chicago and just chanting CM Punk's name is he never really got to finish his story. Like the way he left WWE, you know, when you listen to things like, you know, the Art of Wrestling podcast where he went on and, you know, detailed the whole thing with Colt Cabana, like you listen to that, and it's, if everything happened the way that he says it happened, it's a horribly sad story. So like fans hear that and they're like, this guy never got the ending he should have gotten. So I think for a long time fans were really like, you know, we need to get him back and we need to get him that ending. It's the same thing with a lot of these guys. Same thing with Daniel Bryan, same thing with Edge, where they never got the endings that they should have gotten. And that's why fans were so excited when they were able to come back. It's a great formula. Sometimes really terrible things have to happen for it to, you know, sort of all work out. But I think it's a great story. And I think that CM Punk is absolutely the right person to make all these things happen. Like I think wherever he shows up, I think whatever they do with him is going to be gold. And I can see whatever the interaction between him and the Elite is going to be, if they can find a way to work together. I mean, that's going to, honestly, you know, they talk about the Bloodline being the biggest storyline in wrestling over the last few years, and I think this is going to absolutely eclipse it if those two, you know, entities can find a way to work together.
Well, I mean, they would be silly if they don't ever want to book CMFTR versus the Elite, because the story's already there. The story's there. They just have to pull the trigger and say, all right, can we please agree to do this match because it's going to make us a lot of money. Dax Harwood and Cash with CM Punk versus the Elite is like, I thought they were going to do it at All Out. I don't think they're going to do it now because of the way everything's going to turn out. But if they would have done it at All Out, that show would have sold out immediately.
Absolutely. And I love the whole FTR thing. Like, you know, we're signing for 4 years and that's it. We're done. Like, I love the fact that there's like this sort of you know, finality to it. You know, there's sort of like you know the ending is coming, so you savor more and more what you have. You look at, you know, every match as like, this could be the last time we see this match, or you know, we've only got so long. I mean, can you imagine as it's getting up to the end of that 4 years, like what their sort of, you know, quote unquote retirement tour is going to look like? I mean, those guys are probably going to travel the world and wrestle some of the greatest matches ever.
I mean,
yeah.
Just look at their last year. 2022 was, I think, FTR's best year in wrestling. In terms of where they went to wrestle, the amount of belts they had towards the end of the year. They had 3 different World Tag Team Championships under their belt, and they were just defending them everywhere. New Japan, US, everywhere. They were just defending it, and it was just the coolest to see them have their like big moment last year where they won all the belts. They were on top of the world. They just proved that they are the greatest tag team in modern wrestling, as they always say they are, because they are.
Sure, and they definitely they understand where the business is at and how the business is working. Because if you look at like the stuff they did with the Briscoes and how they basically built that entire feud online. I mean,
Yeah.
the promos the Briscoes cut during that, and just the back and forth between them. I mean, that's we don't get to see that all the time because you
No.
know a lot of the big companies don't always focus on like whatever's going online. But the fact that they and the fact that they didn't pull the trigger too soon on that, like they let that whole thing
Yeah.
build and get really to the point where fans were literally dying to see this match, and then they finally pulled the trigger. And I mean, it's just it's mind blowing how amazing it was.
Yeah.
When you have two talents, like FTR. I mean, those guys are legit superstars. I can only imagine that WWE probably kicks themselves every time they see them do something amazing on TV. Because
Missed
if they had,
opportunity.
oh, absolutely, if they had just let them be them and
Yeah.
do their thing, they are such a throwback to old tag teams, and I think that pulls in the nostalgia factor for people, where they look at them and it reminds them of 80s wrestling, when tag team wrestling really mattered and
Yeah.
tag teams were really great, and they are such a throwback to that, and it gives people that sense of nostalgia.
Yeah. It's just like even their entrance theme, their entrance, their gear, everything they do is a throwback to 80s wrestling at its peak when it was like you said, the most important, where it mattered. Because we all know that Vince hates tag team wrestling, which is
Sure.
part of the reason why I think a lot of tag teams got disbanded or not used properly, was because Vince was never a big fan of tag team wrestling.
Yeah, I'm hoping things are changing. I feel bad when you see teams like Pretty Deadly and everybody's excited for their call up, and then you're just like, yeah, but is it really exciting? Is it really good for them?
Yeah.
It's so hard to figure out where they are these days with that kind of stuff. But tag team wrestling is a conversation for a whole nother show, because there's so many things that we can talk about with tag team wrestling. But I think it's time we get into our main event of the evening, our featured topic. We have put together our lists of the best professional wrestlers to have never won a WWF or WWE World Title. And for me, this is a super interesting topic. This is something I have wanted to discuss for a long time, because I think there are a lot of really great picks out there for this. So I'm interested to just kind of get the thought process behind why certain people think certain ways about certain wrestlers. So I've been super excited to hear your list. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, but I have a feeling that our lists are going to be very different.
Probably. I mean, we haven't talked about our lists. They're both surprises for each of us. So,
Sure.
yeah, I'm excited to see yours and you see mine.
All right, so let's talk about this. So did you do a numbered list, or are they in
Yeah,
they're in a particular order?
yeah, they're in a specific order, 5 to 1. At first I thought it was going to be uh too hard to find a top five, and then or no, I'm sorry, too easy to find top five, and then I realized it was harder than I thought. So, but this is my list for me. This is my personal top five
Yeah.
favorite wrestlers that were never a world champion in WWE.
Awesome. I love it. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start your list. Let's start off with number 5.
My number 5 is the only current WWE talent in the business, and that is Xavier Woods. He may still have a chance to become champion, but I feel like between his charisma, his mic work, his in-ring work, his YouTube show that he has, all the work that he's done over the last 8+ years, he definitely is deserving of a world title opportunity at some point down the line. Whether he gets it or not, he will have a good history list of accomplishments: King of the Ring, Tag Team Champion, multiple Tag Team Champion, probably in the greatest faction of the modern wrestling age, the New Day. But if he would ever become champion, I think it would be a worthy run because he's just that good to me.
Yeah, I definitely like the pick. That is a big surprise. But if you think about it, like he's the of all three members of the New Day, he's the one that seems to have been overlooked the most, and
I agree.
it's almost like it's a perfect setup for him to be a world champion. When you look at everything the world champion does, and promoting WWE and being the face and all these things, he's already out there. He's doing it. If you look at like the new WWE 2K23 video game, he is literally all over that, like everywhere. So
that's his thing. That's
mhm.
his thing. He is a video. As much as he is a wrestler, he is a gamer, and that's why his YouTube show has gotten as far as it's gotten, because he has two of his favorite things in one, and that's gaming and wrestling. And the fact that he can do both and still weave in and out, that to me is why he is so good, because he's versatile. He can do
Mhm.
multiple things
And he's
and
got
still.
he's got credibility too. Like
Yeah,
you actually, yeah, I mean, he's a gamer. He's into, basically everything nerd culture. Like he is the real deal.
yeah, absolutely.
That is a great pick. I love it. I never would have thought of him, but I should have, because that's a great pick. All right, let's move on to your number 4.
Number 4 is Mr. Kennedy.
Ooh,
He was
another
my favorite back in 2005, 2006. I thought the fact that he called himself out of the ring, had the mic, did the double name thing, I thought it was creative and funny. And he was just, again, so charismatic, and his in-ring work told the story. Like, he was good at both, and he had it. But I think due to backstage politics and an injury, when his opportunity had came, unfortunately, he had to drop it to Edge, his Money in the Bank briefcase, and then Edge cashed in and won it instead. But I think if they could have overlooked all the backstage politics and all that stuff and pushed him properly, he could have cashed in and become a real and honestly amazing world champion. Whether it was WWE title or world title, I think either one he cashed in on would have been a great run had everything not happened the way it did.
Sure. And look at his Impact run. I mean, that proves right there that he's championship material. I mean, that
Absolutely.
shows you exactly what he could have done if, the opportunity had worked itself out. So, yeah, another good pick. Another guy I never would have thought of. Very good. Awesome. All right, moving on to number 3.
Number 3, he is a current world champion elsewhere, but he has never gotten the due diligence where he was in WWE, and that is Cesaro. I
Yes.
think they gave him so many opportunities to where he could have been there, but it was always a missed opportunity. He could have been one of their greatest world champions, I think, in the PG era of WWE. Even when he was paired with Paul Heyman, that could have been an amazing run. But I think, again, that was a missed opportunity where I don't know, they just dropped the ball on. To me, they dropped the ball on Cesaro. I know that he won tag team titles and the U.S. title and the IC title, but he never won the big one. And I think he definitely was deserving of it because of his, again, same thing: charisma, agility, wrestling prowess in the ring. The only thing that he really needed to work on, I think, was his mic work, because he wasn't the best on the mic back then. But if he could have honed that craft then, like he has now, he would have been top champion for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've been following Cesaro since the Chikara days, and honestly, I feel like Cesaro is one of their biggest missed opportunities that I think I've ever seen. The guy is a Daniel Bryan, but better level talent in the ring. And that's no disrespect to Daniel Bryan, because I think Daniel Bryan is great, but Cesaro is phenomenal. The guy is ridiculous in the ring, and I feel like if they were focusing more on in-ring work and presentation and less on maybe the total package, they could have given him a chance, but I mean, there's just so much there. If it was a matter of promo work, which I definitely think that, you could make a case for the fact that his promo work absolutely was probably the, sort of shortcoming in his game, as it were.
Yes.
You can definitely make that case. And if that was indeed what kind of held him back, I mean, look at what WWE does when they train wrestlers with promo classes. I mean, you have guys like William Regal, Dusty Rhodes was doing promo classes, Shawn Michaels was doing promo classes. I mean, these are some of the greatest guys in the history of wrestling, and they're at WWE's disposal. So why not take somebody who's got, phenomenal talent in the ring, just freakish strength, and do something with that. That disappoints me, and I feel like Drew Gulak falls in the same category, because I feel like that guy is another phenomenal talent that they're just constantly missing the boat on. And again, I followed him since the Chikara days, and you and I both know that he was a phenomenal comedic talent down there. And how many times do comedic talents get over on TV?
Yeah, it's hard to have a comedy act that will last. Like, yes, like certain comedy acts have. I mean, look at Santino. But like I feel like with their comedy acts, sometimes they try too hard to make it funny, and then it's just not funny.
Yeah. But then you've got a guy that's got the talent in the ring to back things up. So it's just sometimes I wonder, when they look at certain guys, how they don't see what's there. And again, but Cesaro is a phenomenal pick. He's definitely not been given the proper opportunity. So, hopefully now people are starting to see, what a lot of us who have watched him on the indies and kind of followed his career have known all this time, because he is again, I think he's a once in a lifetime kind of talent. And if used properly, people will see that.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
All right. So we're up to number 2.
Number 2 is a kind of an obvious one, but I couldn't not take him off the list, and that's Jake the Snake. He didn't need it because of how good he was, but man, if he would have gotten an opportunity to win even one reign as champion, he could have been one of their top guys. I mean, he already was, but like one reign, just one. He had the charisma, he had the mic work. His promos would give you chills just hearing him talk. I could listen to his promos all day, every day. It's just like the way he said his promos was so eerie. He was like dark before The Undertaker became the dark character. Jake was the dark character, but in his own way, different from like the dark brooding. He was just like menacing. He could take you down. He can talk you up, and he can scare the hell out of you just by talking to you. He was the total package back in the 80s and 90s. Well, 70s and 80s, really.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it always kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit when people say like a wrestler didn't need a title, and I get why people do it, and I understand like there's a lot going for him, but I feel like that title would have been a real concrete physical validation of the work that he did, because I mean he was just there was nobody like Jake the Snake. I mean, on the mic, stuff that he did in the ring, the whole look, the entrance, just everything about him was so completely different.
Absolutely. And was like, like he was the one who created the DDT as a finisher. Like, if we didn't have Jake, I don't know if there would be a DDT finisher. And his always looked so gruesome because he would just drop you flat on the mat, like with no warning. There was no like setup. It was just you're dropped. If you're in the wrong place, that's it. Game over. Match is done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a conversation the other day on Busted Open Radio, and they were talking about how you have these moves, and the DDT was one that they specifically brought up that, you know, was this huge finisher. Like, guys did not kick out of that, and now it's just like, you know, a throwaway move on the way to something else. So yeah, just everything about him was great. So another home run on number 2. So looks like we're up to your number 1. Let's see what you got.
Number 1, Ken Shamrock.
Ken Shamrock. Now
He
that
had
is
such a short run in WWF. He was only there for, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years at the most.
mm-hmm.
But his run, he was with the big players. He was facing The Rock. He was facing, I think, Stone Cold probably at one point. Maybe not in a match, but they at least faced off. He had matches with all these big stars, but he was never world champion. I think if they had given him a proper run, he could have, again, like Cesaro, like Jake the Snake, like everybody else I said on the list, they could have been a great champion, and that would have, like you said, validated their work as an in-ring wrestler. And I think Shamrock for the time had all of that. He was already an MMA fighter. He was the Brock Lesnar before Brock Lesnar was a thing. He went from MMA to wrestling and then back to MMA after that. Like, he already had the fighting instinct before he had to learn wrestling. He could have had it all. And I think, again, it was another missed opportunity back in the 90s where they just didn't see him as that top guy. And unfortunately, that was that. But he could have been a great champion. And it would have validated everything that he did in those 3 or 4 years that he was there for.
Yeah, and I think with a guy like him, it would have been really interesting because you would have seen a very different kind of champion. You know, this very physical, intense sort of, you know, they talk about like in the zone, and just to have a champion who, I mean, his literal focus was just being in the zone all the time and getting in there and just tearing through people. You know, that could have been almost a precursor to what we see with, you know, the more modern day Brock Lesnar, you know, where we don't necessarily, like, if we get away from like all the sort of comedy stuff with Brock and like all the other stuff he did. But if you look at, you know, his run, like, you know, where he tore through Cena at SummerSlam and like that kind of intensity, it could have been, you know, the precursor to all of that. So, you know, again, this is another one of those situations where you look at it and you're like, what didn't they see in this guy?
He had everything. Like, he looked like he could wreck you in the ring. And his theme song made sense. You knew it was Shamrock as soon as his music hit. His in-ring entrance was like, he was just ready to, he almost had like the Goldberg entrance where he wasn't throwing any punches. He was just wanting to get in the ring. And that was it. There was no grandeur, no like, it was just fist to the face, scream, he's in the ring. That's it.
Absolutely. I think for me, the pivotal moment for him and the moment where I kind of see him, you know, sort of stepping up and sort of becoming this superstar, and he wasn't even really in the match, but he was, you know, the special ref for Stone Cold and Brett. And when he just grabbed a hold of Brett and threw him and knuckled up, I was like, all right, this guy's legit. Like, this guy is ready to go at the drop of a hat. And I would have loved to have seen, you know, that sort of intensity as a champion. It would have been fun.
It would have been great, I think.
Wow. I mean, you have just presented a complete list of fantastic missed opportunities. Like the names that are on that list. Again, you know, we sit back and we scratch our head, and, you know, hindsight being what it is, and, you know, who knows what the people in charge were thinking at the time, but yeah, just a ton of missed opportunities.
It's kind of the theme I was going for. It was just, who did they miss on? Who could have they given a bout to? But like I said, with the number 5, I'm still hoping that maybe Woods still has a chance.
Sure.
You know,
I think that would be a great story. I think a lot of it will depend on, and again, this has nothing to do with him, but I think a lot of it will depend on, is Big E coming back? You know, is he going to make an in-ring return? Because I think I really think for one of them to kind of be catapulted forward into a main event role or sort of a shining role, I think you've got to have all three of them there. So you still
Yeah.
kind of have like that New Day sort of team presence, but I think it would be great. I don't ever see like the New Day, idea, the New Day gimmick going away. Like I think these guys are
Oh
probably going
no,
to be New Day till the end.
they've asked
So
multiple times, and he says that we're never breaking up. Like, I'm sorry, it's not happening. The New Day is for life. Like, that there's no breaking up the New Day. Vince apparently has tried multiple times to break up the New Day,
yeah.
and has not been able to do it because they don't want to. They're not. No.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where you could see Woods, like if they were going to run the storyline where, almost kind of like the Seth Rollins thing where he turned on the
Yeah.
Shield, but fans would just crap all over that, I think. I don't
Yeah,
think they
because
have.
they've been around since 2015. They
Mhm.
started in 2014, but they became like the New Day that we know now in 2015.
Yeah,
Was where it really started.
yeah. Yeah, they started off very badly. Like that whole
Yeah.
sort of the you watch the old promos with the choirs singing and
Yep.
like
Yep.
I I don't know. It's a wonder they ever got where they did, but uh all right. So an excellent list. I went in a little bit of a different direction. So I started thinking about the things I thought were qualities that might be important to being a talent or being a champion. What
Right.
things are they looking for? So the first thing I thought of was you've got to have somebody that can cut a good promo. They've got to be able to really. So we were on the same page. I took Jake the Snake Roberts because I mean this guy. I don't think there's anybody, and wrestlers will tell you this too. This is not just coming from me, but wrestlers will talk about this. I don't think there's anybody in the history of professional wrestling that has had the ring psychology inside those ropes that Jake the Snake had.
Absolutely.
Just the wherewithal, the sort of, I mean, it's almost like a sixth sense that he has in that ring, where the man can tell a story not saying a word. The man
Mm-hmm.
can tell a story cutting an amazing promo. And I just, a lot of times, because back then, like, heel champions weren't always the biggest thing. Like, we didn't have this sort of whole idea of the chase at that point. Like, everything was all like the big sort of superhero baby face guys
Yep.
and on top. So they didn't really have this whole big idea of a heel being a really good champion, but I think he could have done wonders as the champion. I think it would have been a really special run just because of how he thinks about the business. There are few guys that think as well as him. I know there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years about Razor Ramon's mind for the business and just the
Yeah.
ideas and storylines that he came up with. I mean, he came up with the Crow version of Sting, like just
Yeah.
the stuff that he's done. So I feel like he's in the sort of same vein as Jake the Snake, and I definitely think they missed one there.
Mm. Again, yeah. I don't know if your list is 5-1 or it's just no
No,
specific order.
it's no specific order. I've just got
Okay.
some
Okay.
different ideas here.
But yeah,
So
Jake just had this ring awareness that like you didn't see in a lot of those wrestlers back in that time. He
mhm,
just knew like how to maneuver, where to go, like how to like even the mind games that he would play, like inside of the ring, outside of the ring, he knew he had such an awareness of how to manipulate us as an audience and
mhm,
even the wrestler in the ring. Like he had us
sure,
all hooked.
sure, absolutely. So yeah, definitely goes again goes along with your theme of just missed opportunities. Um, So the next thing that I thought about when I thought about, what would make a good champion, and again, this is more of an 80s, early 90s thing,
Mhm.
because we really don't see, like, I mean, gimmicks are not big nowadays. Like, wrestlers are who they are. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like it used to be in the 80s, but I feel like gimmick was one of the things that was absolutely, crucial to, the quintessential 80s champion. And so for that, I picked the Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase, because
That's a good one.
I don't think I don't remember a wrestler that, with the exception of maybe, you know, Ric Flair, but Ric Flair was just Ric Flair. Like that,
Yeah.
there was no turning that off. But the Million Dollar Man was the Million Dollar Man. Like there's nobody else Ted DiBiase could be. It's, it got a push through the roof because it was the gimmick that Vince always wanted if he was going to be a
Yep.
wrestler. And you hear Ted DiBiase tell the stories about how much money they put into the character, and they made sure that, like, everywhere he went, it was limos and jets and the best hotels. And like when fans would see him out somewhere, he'd be the Million Dollar Man. And I know a lot of that took a great toll on him.
Yeah.
I've seen his documentary, the one where his son went and learned all kinds of things about him. I've also seen his testimonial video, because he has a ministry now, and he talks about sort of how things changed for him after wrestling and stuff like that. But I just, the Million Dollar belt was such a consolation, because he should have been world champion at one
Or
point.
champion. Mhm.
Again, you talk about not really having the wherewithal to kind of have the heel champions at the time, but I feel like he would have been another just perfect heel champ. And it's sad, because you look at like some of the opportunities that he had. He kind of got the shaft in the whole Andre the Giant scandal with Dave and Earl
Yep.
Hebner, and then that kind of led to the championship tournament at WrestleMania. And
Yep.
we were still in that era where you had to have like the feel good guy ending at the end of WrestleMania. Like you couldn't have, it wasn't years later until Triple H became the first heel to win a main event at Mania.
Yep.
We didn't have it at that point. But I know they were building this whole story with Macho Man and Hogan, where they were going to have them be together and then break up. But just think about the stories they could have built if they pulled the trigger at Mania with the Million Dollar Man. It would have gone in a completely different direction, but I think it would have been equally as amazing.
What would have been interesting too, now that I'm just thinking about it, is what if they had him be the first person to, if you will, cash in for the belt before there was even a Money in the Bank? His character would have made sense to do it. He could have cashed in
Yeah,
and won the belt and say that he won by that reason. Because it would have made sense with all of his other gimmick with the whole $1 Million Man. He has the money. He can
sure.
just pay to win the belt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that would have been the most heelish thing to do, and it would have just feeded into the whole heel champion, because he didn't win it. He didn't face anybody winning. He just said, "Nope, it's mine now. I'm gonna buy it."
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That's again, on the theme of missed opportunities. So, all right, moving on. The next quality, that this will be my third pick. The next quality that I really felt, was becoming of a champion is pure talent. And before I make my pure talent pick, I've got to say the go-to pick all the time for pure talent is Owen Hart.
Of course.
Everybody always says Owen Hart. Well, I didn't pick Owen Hart, but I will say this about Owen Hart, and I don't take anything away from Owen Hart. Owen Hart did amazing things in the ring. His tag team runs were just phenomenal. The stuff he did with his brother Brett was great. I don't think they were ever really gonna pull the trigger on him, and I think the real missed opportunity with him was WrestleMania 10. And what I think they should have done at WrestleMania 10 is I think they should have had Brett defend his championship at the beginning of the show. And then the main event should have been him and Owen. And then when Owen beat him, Owen would have won the title. So this is something I want to do on a future episode where we take an angle in wrestling and rewrite it and completely book it. So that's something I want to do down the line, because I've always wanted to rewrite this Owen and Brett storyline from that year. But
Yeah.
I feel like that was the missed opportunity with Owen. But I don't think there was any chance that they were going to pull the trigger on him, especially not with his brother there. They never saw him as the guy. So for me, I think the real, if I had to pick somebody based on pure talent, my pick would be Mr. Perfect.
Oh, absolutely. He was on the list at one point.
Yeah,
he was on the list at one point, but
he had the look. I mean, Mr. Perfect just felt like a champion. Not to mention, he had the Intercontinental title. He had great matches with Brett. Everything about him just shined. And I also don't feel like enough wrestlers got enough championship opportunities when being managed by Bobby Heenan, which I think if you look at his association with Ric Flair during the championship run, I mean, the combination of Mr. Perfect and Bobby Heenan together is just magic. And when you talk about technical wrestlers, when you talk about athletic wrestlers, guys that could get in that ring and not only have a great match, but we were just talking earlier about Dolph Ziggler being such a great seller. I mean, Mr. Perfect, I can see Mr. Perfect in Dolph Ziggler the way he sells, because Mr. Perfect sold phenomenally as well. And you even look at, when Mr. Perfect made his return at the Rumble and how good he was that year. And then people don't normally talk about this, but the pay-per-view right after the Rumble, he had a phenomenal match with Goldust. Like, he was so good even then. So I feel from a talent standpoint that Mr. Perfect is an absolute missed opportunity as a world champion.
He really had it all. And like what they did with DiBiase's gimmick, they put forth every effort to make Mr. Perfect's gimmick what he is. He is Mr. Perfect. They had the promos, the his ads where he would do anything that he did perfectly with football, basketball. Like, they pushed that gimmick to be the top guy, but didn't give him the top guy title.
Yeah, when you look at wrestlers that talk about Mr. Perfect and they talk about those promos, they always say, like, he was really doing all that stuff in those promos. Like, it was just like him. So yeah, definitely a missed opportunity there. All right. So I always felt like, a good heel champion, is so important to wrestling. And even now when we look at it, because, if we're looking at like Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes and talking about that situation and, was it the right call for him to lose at Mania and all these different things? And they talk about this idea of the chase where, you have that heel champion that just constantly does everything he can to keep that belt, and people will keep paying to see the babyface chase after him. And if we're going to talk about heels and we're going to talk about missed opportunities and people that should have been champion, and again, this goes back to what I said about Jake and validating the work that they've done, I don't think there's any bigger missed opportunity with a heel than Roddy Piper.
Oh my God. The fact that he was never a champion still boggles my mind. I mean, again, he was one of those talents, I guess that you could say that he didn't need it, but he could have been a great heel champion. That would have been the chase, to have like Hogan chase after it, or like Warrior chase after it, or Macho Man chase after. Like,
there's so many great feuds he could have had. I mean, as good of a heel as he was, I mean, the guy could get the entire building to boo him out of the building
Yep.
so easily. I mean, it just came so naturally to him. And as good of a heel as he was, how much better he could have been, with that world title as a prop for him. Just, I mean, he already thought he was better than everybody else, but having that
Yep.
belt would have, shown the world, this, he's backing up everything he's saying. And again, just one of these once in a lifetime talents, and not necessarily in one specific area, but in just everything: the look, the promos, the in-ring work, the selling, everything about him just screamed champion without a
Yeah.
belt. And I mean, you can easily say, everybody always gives so much credit to, Hogan and Vince and all these guys for making the business what it was. But, I mean, anybody that's being truthful about the situation will say there's no Hogan without Piper, especially in those early
Yeah.
days.
You can't have a great face without an equally great heel.
Yeah. What good is being a good guy if there's no heel to foil you, or it's such a balance between good and evil, where you have to have these great opposite ends of the spectrum to really kind of play off each other. And Roddy Piper, just an unbelievable talent that should have had a title.
I 100%.
Now, my
Number
last
one,
pick, my number one, and
the
this
big
was
surprise.
this is the big surprise, and this is honestly the first name I thought of when I thought of my list. And I've been thinking about this name for a while, and this is almost really the reason why I wanted to have this conversation, because I wanted to talk about this. Because when I say the name, you might think, what's he talking about? But I have a really good reason behind it. So I call this my dark horse pick, because I feel like, this is not somebody most people would think of, probably nobody except for me. But my last pick for best pro wrestler never to have won a WWF or WWE World Title is the Honky Tonk Man.
I would have never have thought of that. I'll be honest, because think of his character first of all. Like, they treated him like the Elvis of WWF, which he was. And yes, he had that super long reign with the IC title because it showed that he was a good wrestler. But he could have also been a great world champion.
See, here's my reasoning, and it's all about that IC title. So if you look at that period in wrestling, the Intercontinental title was considered to be the workers' title. They would put it on the guy that could go out there and have great matches and just work well with people every single night. So the fact that he's the longest reigning Intercontinental champion of all time, I feel like screams that he could have been a great world champion. I feel like, because if we're talking about heels that need to be wrestling every night of the week, and they're wrestling somewhere at a live event or MSG or wherever every night of the week, and you need somebody that can work with every type of baby face you've got going. I mean, this guy's perfect. He's got great promo skills. He's got Jimmy Hart. He's got a look that people instantly hate. I mean, you watch, WrestleMania 6 when he comes down in the pink Cadillac and gets in the ring, and him and Greg Valentine sing. I mean, he's that good that Greg Valentine hated him and he was his own tag team partner. Like, it's mind-boggling to me that a talent like that didn't get much further in the business. Now, obviously, being the longest reigning Intercontinental champion of all time is a big deal. And people, fondly remember him for many a thing. But it's a shame. I feel like it's another missed opportunity, maybe not one that everybody would think of, but I feel like he could have had some really great feuds as champion. And then, I mean, just think about what could have come from that. I mean, think about, you really want to push a huge babyface talent, and you have a babyface talent come in and just murder him like the Ultimate Warrior did at SummerSlam.
Yep.
If you're going to take the title off him, and talk about, a sort of cowardly, dastardly heel champion. I mean, this guy could be pulling every trick out of the heel book to keep that title, and that's just going to make people hate him more, hate the gimmick more, want to see him lose more, pay more money to see him lose, and then explode when he finally does. It's like a built-in formula for a great heel champion.
Now, do you think he would have, say he won the belt, do you think he would be a good babyface champion? Or would he have to be heel, just a heel?
I would think that he would have to continue to be a heel unless something happened and he'd have to ditch Jimmy Hart and ditch the gimmick. I don't think he could stay as the Honky Tonk Man. He would have had to wrestle a more traditional gimmick, I think, because I think there was just so much hatred attached to that Honky Tonk Man gimmick. Like, people really did not like him, and that was kind of the point, though. He had the look, and I think he would have to completely ditch all of that. I don't know how well that would have worked. I think he's one of those wrestlers that is 100% typecast. Like, again, like the $1 Million Man. Honky Tonk Man could never be anybody else. Like, I don't think it would work. Just because, and I don't think that could have ever been a babyface gimmick. I think it was just too far down the rabbit hole for that to ever change at all. But I think as a heel, I think he would have done good business. But who knows? Again, we're talking about missed opportunities and just what ifs, and who knows what it could have turned into. But obviously, someone didn't see something in him, or who knows what happened. Why certain people didn't get the shots they may or may not have deserved.
Yeah.
All right, so 2 excellent lists. Obviously, if you are listening out there and enjoying our lists, we would love to hear any thoughts or suggestions you have. You can send us those on Twitter at Mancast Network. You can email us at mancastnetwork@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And overall, I think a really good show today. Definitely a very good first episode. We got to talk about a lot of different things, and I think we both had some excellent lists. I'm very happy with all the discussions we got into about missed opportunities. I think that's probably the biggest thing
of the show.
Yeah, and for what our featured topic was, I think it just fit perfectly into that mold of missed opportunities. So a great show today. It was good getting to sit down and get back into the world of wrestling and have some really good conversations on it. And I'm looking forward to our next episode.
Same here.
All right. So once again, we are Opinion City. You can reach us on Twitter at Mancast Network. You can email us at mancastnetwork@gmail.com. Sean, where can people find you online?
My social medias are scattered, but I think I'm mainly at Parmachizo across the board.
All right. So we will link to some of that on our Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at RealRalph316. I think that's pretty much most of my social media as well. So, questions, comments, concerns, thoughts on our list, agree, disagree, we would love to hear from you. And that's going to wrap it up for our first edition of Opinion City. And we will see you guys next week.
This is also Ann here. You're listening to Opinion City Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.